I came in this morning, they put me in the back and gave me this little badge, and I had a goodie bag back there, a little gift. I didn't see what was in the gift. And I said, well, if nobody comes in my class, do I get to keep all the stuff? And she laughed and said, yes. But I'm honored that you all came in here, and looking in this audience, I'm probably the least qualified to talk on this subject, but I am thankful for the opportunity and look forward to our time together. Appreciate Wayne and the work that he's done through the years. And Granny Bradley, she was one of a kind. Really enjoyed her. We went fishing a lot together, and she'd rather fish as eat, and I'm not teasing about that. She would rather fish as eat, and could tell you a lot of stories about her, and may incorporate some of that into what I'm going to say today. As we think about our lives, and we certainly have to get to the point sooner or later in our attempt to try to reach the world with the gospel, that the world is lost and dying, and they're headed to the judgment. And as we think of those things, then certainly there is a need. There's a need for the gospel to be shared. As I was preparing my thoughts for what I wanted to talk about today, when Philip initially contacted me, the topic has changed a little bit, I think probably into a little bit more of a formal topic, but he said how to reach the world from the inside out. And that was our initial conversation, and that's the direction that I took as I was preparing my thoughts and as I was considering my lesson. And so I don't want to be scattered, but my mind is going in several different directions, and in order to be able to accomplish that task, I'm going to have to talk about several things in order to hopefully make sense of it. I will tell you this: I'm a back of the book kind of a guy. I'm the last chapter kind of a reader. I don't have a lot of time to just sit around and read. I like to read. I have a hard time reading because as I start to read, I think, man, that'd be a good sermon topic, and I lay the book down, and I go over here and I start writing about it. I come back to the book, and it starts all over again. Read 3 or 4 more paragraphs, and I'm back over here. So a lot of times I like to read the last chapter, and let's just kind of get on to the chase here. One thing that I want to be sure, and again, I understand I'm talking to seasoned veterans, and so this is going to be nothing new. The one thing that I want to be sure that we all grasp and that we all understand today is that the only 2 things that you and I can do are the only 2 things that God has asked us to do, and that is to plant and water the seed. As I look at the landscape and over the last years, I'd say probably more so than any other time, I have tried to pay attention to what's going on around in society and try to see how that affects the church. And lately I'm hearing a lot of new words. Some words that I heard years ago and I've thought about through the years. We talk about the unchurched. And if we were going to define the unchurched, then how would you define that? If you were going to define that, what would you say if we talk about those who are unchurched?
Absolutely. No. Just don't go to church.
Yeah, this has never been their thing. Okay? There are a lot of folks in our society who have never, so we have the nevers, right? And we use those, and we talk about those, in our circles we talk about them as the unchurched. There is a new group that's emerging. And I've done a lot of reading, a lot of research, a lot of concentration, a lot of thought in this new group, and they're called the nuns, not N-U-N-S. We know about them, right? But the N-O-N-E-S's. Now that group is a formidable group in our society. In fact, statistics, vary from person to person and from group to group. But some of these folks, it's their job to kind of figure some of these things out and to survey and try to understand the landscape on some of this. I've reached the conclusion that we are now living in a society where there are fewer people than ever before who are attending any church, much less our fellowship. The last survey that I read, and actually I saw more than one that indicated the same idea, is now there are fewer people going to church in the United States than who are attending any church. The last thing I saw is that those who attend at some church at some point during the course of a month, that group is now 48% of our culture, 48% of the citizens or those who live in the United States. The one, that says, "In God we trust, one nation under God, indivisible." We now have a majority in our society. The majority is the people who are not attending church anywhere. Now, if you want to start looking at the group who is attending, then you've got to break it down into where they're going and then how often they are attending. And you'll see if you do, and maybe you've already seen some of this, you'll see that in the statistics and the surveys that are being taken, that now the number of people who are only attending a church, the majority of them are only attending one time a week, and really there are more than that who only go maybe once a month. And so you see the trend and the paradigm has shifted in a lot of this sort of thing, because there was a time when everybody you talked to went somewhere for the most part, and they were religious at some level, whether you agreed with them or not, or whether they agreed with you. They were religious at some level. But now we got this group of folks called the nuns, N-O-N-E-S, and there are a lot of people talking about them. And those are the folks who have been what you and I might understand that this word is being disenfranchised from religion altogether. They've seen what's going on television, and they've heard about the different scandals, if you will, regarding religion, and seeing some of the guys that represent, whether we like it or not, they really represent all of us, even though they don't represent any of us for the most part. But as far as the world is concerned, they're seeing and hearing, these folks that are on television, and they say, well, hey, if that's what it's going to be about, then I'm all right by myself. In fact, I'd rather just kind of handle this my own way. And so the nuns are becoming more of a norm than anything, I suppose, at this point. And then you got this group, and they're not bad people, but you got this group called the millennials, and they, with all due respect to them, they don't think like any other group has ever thought in the recent history. For the most part, our churches at Atlas, we're represented by 6 generations. There are 6 generations from our oldest to our youngest. There are 6 generations that are represented in the confines of our congregation. Just 2 years ago, we had 6 World War II veterans that all worshiped at Atlas. And our Veterans Day celebration, we still make a big deal about that at Atlas, and we try to acknowledge those who have served in our military, and especially those who served in World War II, because, they're not called the greatest generation for nothing. But we got a new group. In fact, you may know this, but that new group called the millennials, they represent the largest population of any segment of a society than any other group ever has. At this point, they are in the numbers around 72 million. 72 million. At one time, there was the greatest generation, and then the silent generation, and then there was the baby boomers. And I'm right at the tail end of the baby boomers, those 1940-something to 1964. There's a little bit of difference. And then I had always called the next group the baby busters, but now they're called Generation X. And then there's Generation Y, Generation Z, the modernists, and then the postmodern, and now the millennials. And so you see all these groups, and what you and I, the way you and I, or some of us, would reason is different than the way the millennials reason. And they may reach the same conclusion. It's like some of this Common Core math that they're teaching, 2 plus 2 equals 4 as far as I'm concerned, right? But now the way they're teaching children now, I'm not sure I could pass second grade math, the show Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? If they're going to do it like that, I'm not sure I would get there. But now it really makes sense to some of our younger folks. We've got younger folks in this audience, and I appreciate that. So when we start talking about trying to reach our community, we've got to understand that there may not be just one thing. And it may be a series of trials and errors in order to be able to understand how you do what you do. But again, I want to be sure we understand that Paul said, I planted, Apollos watered, and God gave the increase. As you look at biblical history and as you see what was talked about in the Bible, Andrew went and found who? He went and found his brother, didn't he? In John chapter 1 and Mark chapter 5, you remember the man that had been possessed with the demons. He immediately wanted to be a preacher. You remember, he wanted to go with Jesus. Let me go with you and be a part of that. What did Jesus tell him? He said, go home to your friends and your family and tell them what great things the Lord has done for you. And so we see those two examples, and then we go to Acts chapter 2. And you hear the first gospel sermon, and you hear what Peter says, and then you get to verse 36, and he said, let all the house of Israel know assuredly that God had made the same Jesus. They knew about it, whom you have crucified, both Lord and Christ. When they heard this, they were pricked in their heart, and they said to Peter and the other apostles, men and brethren, what shall we do? He said what? Repent and be baptized, every one of you, in the name of Jesus Christ, for the remission of your sins, and ye shall receive the gift of the Holy Ghost. For the promises to you and to your children, to all them that are afar off, even as many as the Lord our God should call, with many other words did he testify and exhort, saying, save yourself from this untoward generation. The day that gladly received his word were baptized, and that same day they were added unto them about 3,000 souls. And they continued steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine, the fellowship, the breaking of bread, and prayer. And as you see the rest of that chapter unfold, you see what I want to talk about today, this experience of the church being the church, the world seeing it happen, and then verse 47, and the Lord added to the church daily such as should be saved. Now I'm going to ask a hard question. And if you don't want to answer it, it's okay. How many of our congregations today are, in the truest sense of the word, growing? If there are any, they are few. And I'm 52 years old, and I'm starting to be concerned about the direction that things seem to be headed. When Jesus was here and he's talking about building his church on the rock, you remember as Jesus was going through the coast of Caesarea Philippi, he said, who do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? And they began to answer, some say you're John the Baptist. Look, that's not a bad answer. If you don't know who Jesus is, and somebody says John the Baptist, that's not a bad answer. And if somebody says, well, you're Jeremiah. Well, if you don't know who Jesus is, Jeremiah is quite an Old Testament character. And if you don't know who he is, then Jeremiah is not a bad character to be compared to. I recently just did a Wednesday study over the course of the last 5 or 6 weeks, and looking at Jeremiah and the things that were going on. He was living right when the temple when it was all happening in 586. He was there and he saw it. In fact, the book of Lamentations was written before the book of Jeremiah. And incidentally, most people think that Jeremiah wrote probably 1st and 2nd Kings. So there's a lot of history to be seen in all of that. So somebody says, you're Jeremiah. If you don't know who Jesus is, that's not a bad answer. And, as you look back, Elijah was quite a character in of himself and the things that he did He was quite a formidable man in his own right. And so somebody says, well, you're Elijah. That's not a bad answer if you don't know who Jesus is. But then he turned to his disciples and he said, who do you say that I am? Jesus needed to know that they knew. He needed to be sure that they understood, because he was going to commission them to do what? Go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. And he warned them, it's not going to be easy. He sent them in pairs. I mean, there's a lot to do with a matter of encouragement and trying to be sure that you have your protection and all the things that you might need, and being together in pairs. And so you hear what even Peter said in that regard when he said, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. If you and I walk out into our world today and you say, who is Jesus? Well, we've got to remember that 52% are not doing anything with him right now. You've got the folks that don't know anything about him, and then you've got the folks who don't want anything to do with him. We talked about the nuns a few minutes ago. And so as we think about our society, then let's not be fooled to think this is going to be an easy situation. It's not going to be. It's not going to be easy. I was doing a little research. Hope she didn't take my picture while my glasses were all sideways. Did a little research on this, and the research is a couple of years old. But it's staggering to me to think that we have lost the membership that we have lost in recent years. In fact, one of the surveys that was done, and I've got some of it written down here, but one of the surveys that was done indicated that we have lost over 500 congregations in the last 6 years. Now, that's staggering to me. Losing over 500 congregations. Our membership is down almost 500,000 people. So what I'm seeing here is a little bit of a panic. And there's some things that are happening because people are reacting to what's going on. And you see what's going on in our society, and folks are reacting. And I saw one survey recently that talked about the 100 fastest growing churches. Everybody see, I've got quotation marks here. 100 fastest growing churches in the United States. The 100 largest congregations in the United States. And on both lists, neither list contained not a single congregation of the Church of Christ. Neither list contained a congregation of the Church of Christ. Now, somebody may say, well, they might not have been checking the Church of Christ. I will give you that. But everything that I did in regard and all the research that I've done over the last several months, I can't find what I'd say to be a single congregation that is sustaining any kind of growth that is growing faster than they're losing folks. And if that's happening in your congregation, don't feel alone. There are a lot of folks that are experiencing that. And Atlas is no exception. So I'm not here to tell you that we've got it all worked out and everything's going great and we don't have anybody that gets discouraged and goes somewhere else or stops attending at all, because we have both of those things happening. But I do want to tell you some of the things that we are doing and some of the things that are working, that are providing opportunities for people, using the terms that we're familiar with, to come through the front door. And we're really working hard on closing up the back door to keep folks from being discouraged or going somewhere else or stopping their attendance altogether. Some weeks ago, as I was doing some work for something else, I sat down and I just kind of mapped out what our congregation looks like on paper. One of our elders, I was talking to him about it later, he said, we need to take that worker bee approach. And so we talk about benevolence, we talk about edification, we talk about evangelism. And basically, and I already had this all written down before that conversation. But I just wanted to see what we look like on paper, and this is with a pencil and a piece of paper. I know most of us don't work that way anymore. I don't either. I actually have it on a printed form that looks a whole lot better. But this is what it looked like when I wrote it all down. This is what the Atlas Church looks like on paper. And I went through each of the areas that we're involved in and the things that we do, and I didn't leave anything out. I didn't add anything to. These are all real. But I talked about our education, and we take a lot of time in our education program, and I don't know that I have time to go through all the details on all of this, but I talked about education, talked about benevolence, talked about our building and our grounds, and you think, well, why do you want to put that on here? You know, the number one thing, if you do any survey research, the number one thing that people are looking for anymore when they come to your church or when they come to your building, you know what the number one thing they're looking for? How clean the bathroom is. And you know what number two is? How clean the nursery is. Those are two things. And you think, no, wait, we're here to see about Jesus. We're talking about people that don't know Jesus. Their friends and their neighbors that said, hey, come over here and go to church with me this Sunday. They walk through the door. The first two things they want to see, they want to see how clean the building is. Now, you might see a survey that sees those reversed, but you won't see a survey that don't have those two things that I mentioned outside the top 5. So that's the battle we're facing. So building and grounds is on this list. Edification, how we spend the money, that's just written down as financial. Ministerial, our youth, our university, ministries, our worship, our outreach, our missions, our transportations, our audio and visual, youth training, the different things that we have. We developed something that I learned over at the Tupelo Church. I preached over there not long ago. And after church, I saw these little girls running around with aprons on, from 4-year-old to 2nd grade or something. They're called the Cup Cuties. And they found something for the little girls to do, and so they pick up the communion cups after church. They got their little buckets and their little aprons. They got their names on them. We implemented that at Atlas just recently. So as we look at the picture, of our congregation, and I would challenge you to do this yourself. To sit down, take enough time to see what you look like. Now, this is a pretty big piece of paper, and there's pretty small writing on it. There are a lot of things going on. Going on at Atlas, and somebody said, well, now, wait a minute. Evangelism is the most important. I understand that. I'm not negating that. But there are some other things that are important, too. In order to encourage the saved, you've got to manage and maintain that, and then you reach out to those who are erring, and then you reach out to those who are lost in regard to all of that. So this is what it looks like if you look at it on this kind of paper. It looks a little bit different as it's a little more organized, and I'll lay that there if somebody wants to peruse that. I typed in the word church growth, and they said I could preach, so I drank this bottle of water. So y'all may want to be passing around so we get finished a lot earlier. I don't know if anybody wants to drink after me. I'm just teasing. Oh. Well, actually, I don't need that one, but thank you, Wayne. Thank you. Let me ask you, I'm going to get back to what just happened here in just a second. How does it affect you to hear that not one of our congregations is on the fastest growing? Doesn't surprise you. Does it bother you?
It bothers me.
I was surprised, which we're in different age groups. I was surprised. I thought, surely.
I know why some of it's happening. I've been watching this trend in my study of church history.
Yes, sir. And I told you, I was the least qualified. You need to be standing here instead of me. But Wayne has got another door we can open here when he's talking about looking at church history. And I don't know what time I'm supposed to stop, but if I have time at the end, I do want to make some observations about all of that. But let's talk about Atlas and what we're doing. In my experience, and Wayne told you some of the places that I have preached, and I love and respect each of those congregations. And each of those congregations has special things to me, and so anything I say about Atlas is not in comparison to or necessarily talking about anything negative about the others, okay? So I'm assuming this is being taped, so I want to be sure that everybody understands that I'm not talking about the other churches, because there are a lot of great things I can talk about them. But I was asked to talk about Atlas. Atlas, in my estimation, is one of the most benevolent-minded churches that I know of. Our benevolence budget, in my experience, is one of the largest that I've seen. We have budgeted somewhere near $40,000 in our budget for benevolence. Now, just to give you an idea about our budget, our yearly budget is near $600,000. Our average attendance is about, at this point, about 325 on Sunday morning. We have an afternoon service at 1:30 every Sunday. We have an evening service at 6 o'clock every Sunday. We have a Wednesday morning service at 10 every Wednesday. Wednesday night service at 6:30 every Wednesday. So those afternoon services on Sunday are or services. We ask them to come to one or the other. On Wednesday, the same thing, one or the other. So average numbers at each of them have been maintained kind of across the board. We have averaged as much as 350. And in my time there, when I first came there, we were running about 260 or so on Sunday. And appreciate the work of all the folks that go on there. But our benevolence budget is about $40,000. Now, let me tell you this: we exceed that budget every year. We have some things that we do that our church, that our congregation knows about. They tell their friends, hey, if you need help with your utilities, call our office. If you need help with some kind of house payment, call our office. If you need help with groceries, call the church. If you need help with whatever it is, a lot of people call needing gas for their car, then it's not a rubber stamp and everybody doesn't get help. There is a process, but there is a process. A lot of places, they said, no, we're just going to help our own folks. Well, there's times when that's all you can do, and I understand that. But at the same time, in reaching out and trying to meet the needs of the folks in our community, then we do have an active, benevolent ministry that's overseen by one of our elders and two of our deacons. And from a ministerial perspective, it would be easy for me to answer the phone and say yes or no. They don't want me to have to deal with all of that, and to the degree also that sometimes if you tell people no, they don't like it. And so they try to shield me from that, because they can kind of say no over there, and then somebody else lets them know, but we don't completely shut the door on the ability or the opportunity that we have to talk with them about Christ. If someone comes to pick up a benevolent check or whatever it is, they have to come through my office, and I get to talk to them a little bit about Jesus, and get to talk to them a little bit about the church, and for the most part, they're all going to come next Sunday. And, we're looking forward to it, and we want a Bible class, and we're going to be there now. We're going to be there, and then you don't see them till the next time they need help, and then so we've got a little bit of that, but that doesn't diminish our desire to want to help them. That doesn't diminish our desire to want to help them, because you can't ever tell. Being able to help them is our responsibility. What they do with it is their responsibility. Tell you a funny little story. Some years ago, when I was preaching at Decatur Highway, Brother Jack Black was my co-worker there, and he was also one of our one of our elders, Andy's son, Drew, was our youth minister there. I'm so proud of Drew. Drew's doing a great job at Asheville Road, and I continually hear great things about him, Andy, and I'm so proud of him and thankful for Drew. But nonetheless, Jack came and got me one morning, and he said, we've got a lady here that's needing some help. And typically I don't give out cash just for the sake of you can't control what's being purchased with it. And so that was really all we could do at that moment. And she was a rather tall girl and kind of strong. And so Jack, he's a good bit smaller than I am. And so I talked with this lady for a little bit. She had 8 children. She was pregnant with the 9th one, and that was all legitimate. And so, the story worked out. There were really 8 children, and there was a 9th one on the way. So Jack came and said, what do you think we ought to do? I said, well, I think we ought to help her. I said, you got any money? He said, yeah. He said, you got any money? I said, yeah. I said, let's give her $40. He said, okay. So I pulled up my billfold, I got my 20. He did the same. I walked in, I said, ma'am, here, we're going to give you this $40, and maybe we can get you finished up for the day, and we'll work on some more later. And she just grabbed me and just hugged me like everything. Well, Jack was not much of a hugger. And he didn't mind hugging a little bit, but he didn't want me to hug like that. But I just couldn't resist. I said, look, he gave half this money. You need to hug him too. Chase him down to hug him. So sometimes benevolence, you may get more of a hug than you want. That was pretty funny. But nonetheless, we have an active benevolent program. And one thing that I would suggest in regard to this reaching out to the community is that you look for people to help instead of waiting for them to come to you. Congregation I was at several years ago, we made it known, if you have a house fire, we're going to be there immediately with, I think at that time it was $200. And $200 will buy you something to wear if you don't have something to wear. It'll buy you some food if you don't have any food. It'll get some shoes for your feet if you don't have shoes for your feet. In fact, it'll buy all of that. And we told them to begin with, we said, if you need more right now, tell us. But we had a fund particularly set up for that. And we worked it that way in that particular situation. And there was a deacon who was in charge of that. If someone called and said so-and-so's house is on fire, then I would call him. He'd get the money and go there before it was put out. Most of the time, he'd be there to be of help to them and reaching out in that way. We have what's called the Servant's Heart Ministry at Atlas, and this is a ladies' ministry. It's under the realm of the leadership of the elders. Understand that, but they let them take care of it, and they contribute their own money. They buy their own things, and often for times of bereavement or times of emergency, an emergency need of food, then we call the Servant's Heart Ministry ladies, and they take it from there. They either contact the family that might need food for a funeral or might need food before a funeral. They might need food because of an accident or some tragedy that has not resulted in death. But they provide food in that regard, and it is overseen by the elders, but again, the ladies take care of it, and we've learned that they know better and how to do that than we could even advise or encourage. We also have the Wednesday lunch program. And every Wednesday, a group of ladies prepares a meal, and they deliver meals to over 40 people in our community. And those folks know that food comes from Atlas. We're involved in the backpack program. We provide weekend meals for some students at Rogers. We don't know the students, the school, because of some of the HIPAA laws or whatever rules of the school in regard to confidentiality. We don't know who we're helping, but they know we're helping. And we provide the money for that, and that comes through our benevolence. We get it from the food bank that's delivered to our church building. And then we have some guys that make the sacks up every Wednesday night, and then those are delivered on Thursday, and then they're handed out on Friday. And the children have meals then, enough for them and some family members over the course of the weekend, a backpack program that really works well. Some of the other things that we do, we have Monday morning prayer. And a lot of folks call and say, hey, would you please add me to your prayer list? At 6 o'clock on Monday morning, everybody in our community knows that there are some guys at Atlas that are praying. We have 8 o'clock coffee on Tuesday morning, and it starts at 8 o'clock. But we have folks and we invite people to say, hey, come over and enjoy some fellowship with us. It's not church time. We don't even have a devotion. Most of the time we're reading in 5 minutes. Okay, most of the time we're reading the obituary. And you know, the interesting thing around here, everybody dies in alphabetical order. Have y'all noticed that? So most of the time we read the obituary. We have the golf tour, the Atlas Golf Tour. And we have about 40 guys in our congregation and outside our congregation that a monthly golf event is planned. And we go, that could be done for knitting, it could be done for quilting, it could be done for basketball, it could be done for whatever. But it's an activity where you can involve outside folks to come and be a part of what you're doing. We have VIP, which is an acronym for Visits in Progress, or Visitation in Progress. We have a group that meets every week. Some meet on Sunday afternoon, some on Monday night, some on Tuesday night. And we assign visits for them to go and see, especially if we have somebody who is a visitor. We have a new mover outreach, and I paid a service through outreach.com. And they gave me, I get to put all the information on it. They mail it out for us. It's 89 cents. We designated a 3-mile radius around our church building. And it averages anywhere from 15 to 18 new movers per month that get a card. I get a list, we send a letter. We're in the process of providing now a home visit to say hello. We would like to invite you to come and worship with us. We have the radio spots. I do 3 a day. I do one on WLAY at 7:45. I do one on WQLT at 5:50 in the morning. And then during sports talk, in the course of a day, I have one each day. We do a Facebook post, opportunity to let folks know. There's a way to boost those. You can pay a little bit of money and they'll help you provide information to folks that even aren't on your Facebook friends. I have 5,000 friends on my Facebook, and most of that is just so I can get the word out about church. There are other things that I talk about, family. I don't exclude my family things, but they do. If they're on my list, they're going to see some things about church, and so that's part of that. Something that I say often in regard to inviting someone to church is Jesus will be there. I hope that you will be too. And so we try to do that. The thing that I do want to say, and I don't want to run over, he's already given me my 5-minute time here. One thing that I want to encourage and help you avoid if you haven't already gone down this road, because I'm telling you, I've been down this road and I've had to reach a different conclusion. Sometimes we want to limit what we do to the idea of marketing our church to the degree that we try to get people in the doors. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but we've got to be sure that we don't stop there. Yes, there are tactics and there are strategies and there are ways to get people into your building. But you and I have to remember, as we're reaching out to our community, that we have to get Jesus into their heart in order to accomplish anything. If we just get them in our building, they'll stay a while, they'll be gone. But our main goal and our main idea should be to help them understand about Christ, to help them understand about salvation, to help them know about grace and love and mercy and forgiveness and all the things that go along with the idea of being there. I think for the most part there are times when people, you know, their idea of being a Christian is showing up at a building 2 or 3 times a week. But we need to help them understand that this is a way of life. And some of these things that I've talked about are ways so that we can extend our hand to show them the love of Christ, so that when we start talking to them about Christ, they understand that it's not just one thing or the other, it's both. And so how do you grow the church from the inside out? That's really the only way you can do it. If your family invites another family, or if you invite a friend, then they know that you love them enough and want to help them to the degree that you would help them. But at the same time, you've got to really help them in doing like Andrew, bringing them to Christ. Doing like the man that was demon-possessed. Go home to your friends and family. Tell them what great things the Lord has done for you. We may have a minute left or so. Anybody have a question or a comment or a thought? Maybe even something that you'd like to say. Yes, sir.
You're talking about people who just go once a month. First person came to mind was my chiropractor. He has a mentality. He says, I go once a month whether I need it or not.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Attending the local community church.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Miles, what I was referring to a while ago about a lot of these churches that are growing large, they're getting to where they stand for less and less theologically, and people just want to feel good.
Mm-hmm.
The disciples of Christ, some of them, their groups have been ranked in the last 10 or 15 years as some of the fastest growing congregations, but they've gone to universalism where they believe all you have to do is believe Jesus is the Son of God and you're okay.
Mm-hmm. I did a church growth Google. Just Google church growth. I got 13 million results. And the first few things you see is the 5 most important church growth principles. Okay? Outreach is priority. Social networks are the vehicle. Felt needs are the connecting point. Relationships are the glue. Transition periods provide windows of opportunity. The second one, 6 essentials for church growth. The third one was 5 barriers to church growth. The fourth one was 10 enemies to church growth. And so you see, this is a hot topic in our society. Yes, sir.
The real answer is just preach the gospel.
Yes, sir.
There wasn't any friendship gospel or evangelism in the scriptures.
Yes,
Paul
sir.
went somewhere and stood up and preached. People got mad at him and they accepted or whatever, and he just got up there and preached. If we could get out doing that again, we would make a lot of friends and a lot of enemies.
Yes, sir.
But we would help a lot of people become Christians.
That's right. We've been talking about that lately. Let me share this right quick, and I wanted to make this point. This is the kind of point I was wanting to make earlier. There are a lot of tactics and a lot of strategies and a lot of this and that sort of thing. And what you hear often is that, folks are looking for entertainment and that sort of thing. And I could speak another 30, 40 minutes and all of that whole thing. But I'm going to tell you, our brother, I think, hit on it. The first century church grew. What was it that Paul told Timothy? Preach the word. Be instant in season, out of season, reprove, rebuke, exhort. In the first century, first day, he said, you killed the Christ. What shall we do? Repent and be baptized. 3,000. If you keep reading, chapter 4, verse 4, now it's up to 5,000 men. Same message. If you keep reading chapter 5, verse 14 of Acts, it's now multitudes. Chapter 6, verse 1, they rapidly multiplied. And then chapter 8, verse 4, they went everywhere doing what? Preaching the word. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to say, to connect with this quickly and everything, that like 1 Corinthians, Thessalonians, and we know the situation there in Newport Church and everything that had many enemies and everything to pull them out of the faith. And says there, let's give them something to talk about and not say a word. I have learned if you are truly convicted and you are in the world. I worked at a factory one time around a table with the world, and they knew who I was and what I stood for. And just knowing me and knowing that I had even took it to of what Christ had done for me.
Yes, ma'am.
People, I didn't have to say a word. I didn't even bring up religion. They started coming to me every day. Do I have to be baptized? This Seventh-day Adventist told me that I couldn't, even if I was baptized, I couldn't be saved because, or go to heaven,
Mm-hmm.
and so forth. And they just it's just questions off the wall and everything.
Yes,
they
ma'am.
know what you stand for, and you shine with conviction of holding up the banner of Christ. They will start coming to you. I have found out.
That's great. Yes, sir.
When you're talking about the shock of the church not being part of the growth in religion, you think one of the reasons might be because instead of focusing on and seeing what the needs of the people of our community are, we're trying to do, like I said, more focus on the building.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of saying what the needs are and addressing those first. You think that might be one of the issues?
I do. In fact, what I conclude on this would be to say this. The first century church grew. They weren't concentrating on growing. They were concentrating on Christ. And I think maybe that's where we might stumble as we're trying to figure out how do we grow instead of concentrating on Christ. And again, preach the word, preach the word, preach the word. I planted, Miles watered, and what? God gives the increase. God gives the increase. Any other questions or comments?
I'll say one of the main things you see in the first century church, in Acts chapter 2 especially, is the community and the family. And we have, over the past several decades, fell into, we don't preach the word as much as we need to, we don't talk about Christ as much as we need to, but we've also just come and worship when we go home a lot of times. It's essential to get involved in people's lives, and a lot of what you share today has to do with that. For instance, the golf. Somebody might say, well, that's entertainment. No, it's an opportunity to be around them and to influence them. Then you can tell them about Christ. Our problem is we don't open our mouth and tell them about Christ. We just have fun with them.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
but they've got to see Christ in us, and so we need to show them that it's a spiritual family also. I think that's very important. Involvement is not an option.
Yes, sir. I can tell you two beautiful stories. I don't have time during this session. Be glad to share, but two beautiful stories where a couple saw a group of us all playing together. So where are y'all from? We're from this church. What are y'all doing out here? Well, we're just enjoying some golf. Y'all ought to come and go to church with us. They were there the next Sunday. We played golf with him the next week. The next Sunday, his wife was baptized. He was restored. And on down the line. Just a case about the tour. Could I have got 2 more minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Is it
We're
lunchtime
off the
next?
record anyway, go ahead.
Okay, off record. Okay. Andy Kaiser here, he preaches out at Salem, Super Church, one of the first ones I attended. Interestingly enough, Atlas is the first church I ever attended when I was a baby. My daddy preached there, and so I get to preach every Sunday for the place. And the people that used to carry me around on their hip and heard me cry and squall all the time. And so, thankfully, the Lord forgives and people forget. But nonetheless, Andy called me the other day and said, tell me about this golf tour y'all got. Well, guess what? Now there's a Salem golf tour. All right? Listen, thank y'all. I appreciate it. I'm available to talk more if you'd like, but I understand your schedule and things to do. Brother Wayne.
Thank you, Miles.
Thank you.